Okay, they want us to jump. Or they want you to jump, because that's what I'm saying. And the Omonile issue has been brought to fore here. Lagosians are worried that government, in spite of taking charge of land acquisition in Lagos State, whereby when you buy land from somebody, you still have to go pay a percentage to government for concession and all those stuff. And that yet, government turns a blind eye to the fact that Omoniles still claim to own the property even after it's passed like 4, 5, 7 hands. Every time the property exchanges hands, Omoniles come and claim that you have to pay extra. They want to know what the government is doing to help ensure that once you finish the transactions from one point to the other with government consent and everything, then you don't need to go back to Aboriginal rights anymore, because Aboriginal rights should have passed on to the person who bought the land the first time. So why does Omonile keep asking and demanding, and government isn't doing anything to stop them?
Well, I want to perhaps suggest that your conclusions that government isn't doing anything is rather too general.
They asked.
Okay, I take that back then. Whoever made the conclusions is rather too general. We are doing a lot to protect property rights, but the point must be made that some of the things that we see, people still don't sufficiently embrace their government. So they would rather buy land privately only to find out that they have been dealt a very poor hand. And then they now run to us. Because really, if you wanted to buy land, knowing now that all land is vested in the government in trust for the people, the first place of contact should be the government. But people first go and pay to families, only to find out that the family had no title to pass on the land to them. And this is where the journey begins into sometimes very unpleasant experiences. But that said, I know that there is consideration for a specific legislation to abolish violent conduct with regard to the disposition of disputes concerning land. We really didn't need a special law because it should be easy to have dealt with it under the criminal law. But we think that a special law will perhaps strengthen the spine of the police. But you see, these are some of the issues that agitate the demand for state police. It's actually an enforcement issue. But when the police is busy with kidnapping, armed robbery, and all of those things, things like land disputes just take a further drop in the priorities, because when you are fighting about protecting life and property, ownership of assets takes, I mean, if there's an emergency, they tell you just leave everything first and run. And land takes its ranking way back there, because you can only come back to land if you are alive. So these are some of the issues about enforcement and the need for multi-level policing in order to be able to provide support and to protect. So there's so many rights that need to be protected. That is really the heart and soul of the discussion about Omonile, protecting land rights, property rights. And it requires some level of enforcement sometimes, because the so-called Omonile actually go up with cudgels, machetes, sometimes guns, and therefore innocent citizens really have to take to their heels. But if there was the sufficient complementary repellent force at the state level, and so if the state has control over land, it does not have the necessary complement of coercive authority to exercise control, you see a constitutional mismatch, and you see all of this kind of, and same thing with protection of women's rights. We mouth them, but how many cases of rape have you had taken to court? How many cases of child abuse have been prosecuted? Because the police at the state level from federal are dealing with much more profound issues.
But the detractors or the guys who don't want state police, they claim that it could result in abuse. Because from all you're saying now, there are benefits of having state police, but how do you address that?
We have to choose. You see, we cannot refuse to do something simply because of an assumption. They claim that governors will abuse it, for example. First of all, that is based on an assumption that there are 36 irresponsible governors. That's the first assumption. But while that assumption persists, the reality we have is that somebody has lost his life over land. The reality we have is that a girl child has been raped. The reality we have is that a woman has been brutalized. They are not assumptions. But because of an assumption, we allow this pain to continue. I don't know what kind of people do that. And what you see is that society, as it is structured today, prefers to secure the individual rather than the community. So you see a lot of undeserving people moving with mobile and non-mobile arms and all of that. And the whole community remains vulnerable. And we say we don't want community or multi-level policing. It just doesn't add up to me. It doesn't make sense.
Abraham.
Yes.
Question.
Your Excellency, I was privileged to hear your Commissioner of Agric speak yesterday. And he was talking about efforts, good efforts at increasing food production in Lagos. And one of the things that struck me was this idea of going into full-scale agronomy, cultivation, yet Lagos does not have land. So he said something almost like outsourcing land, going into partnership with other states where you are cultivating rice fields and all of that. I didn't have the time to ask him the arising issues, like how do you cooperate with those states? That is at one level. You go over to Niger State and all of that to cultivate rice and then bring to Lagos. I don't know the arrangement, the collaborative arrangement that can make that possible.
Okay.
Then the second level is, which will be easier for you to go into primary production, or since you have the capacity, the industrial environment and every other thing here, why not take the secondary level of improving the value chain? Like tomatoes, for instance, close to 70% of the harvest is lost. Why can't you go into the processing of it, into cans and all of that things, and leave the agronomy for states that have land to do? That is my question.
Well, I wish it was that simple. But first, to answer your question, we are encouraging and supporting processing, which is the place where we have the comparative advantage because of our industrialization and all of that. But at the same time, all of that remains dependent on you getting the raw materials. And all we are trying to do is that agriculture food is a national security or state security issue. You must never leave yourself totally vulnerable where you cannot support yourself should there be a crisis. You must never be in a situation where your hands are totally behind your backs. So our land, part of our land in Ise, in Ikorodu, in Badagry, are good enough to support cultivation of rice. So we cultivate rice. So, and we have a mill in Imota. We are now doing about 300 hectares of farmland in Lagos alone of rice, and we are milling. Added to what we are doing outside the state, we are over 1,000 hectares by my last count, because we have 500 hectares in Ogun. Now, how does this work? When I initiated the discussion with my colleagues and we accepted that this was sound policy, it was simple thinking. Our land is good for its real estate value. Almost every state in the country has a liaison office or the other here. and they're safe. We secure them. So by the same token, why can't I have land in their state to farm? And they will secure it. Now, what does that do? It does a couple of things. First of all, agriculture has the capacity to employ many more people, not only in haulage and in transport, but also in processing, as you have indicated. So why shouldn't my people participate in that venture? And there are a lot of cooperatives in Lagos doing subsistence and low-end farming in order to support themselves and their families. We can't cede all of that power out of the state and say, don't touch it. So we support them, and we intervene in those places like rice cultivation, vegetables, poultry, fishery, areas where we have some advantage. Of course, because of our land size, we could never really aspire to the kind of full sufficiency of production. But if we are able to provide for ourselves at least 25% of our needs, if there's a crisis sometime in future, at least we can begin first to look in our backyard before we begin to beg or to negotiate, as it were. And the distribution chain through our farmers' mart is an opportunity too good for us to miss, to encourage people. We are opening up supermarkets, malls. They also require supplies. Poultry, cattle, beef, fish. So our people must participate in all of that if we are really to strike any serious dent on the unemployment issue.
Okay. At this stage, other people have called in, well, sent some SMS messages in. So I'll just give you a series. I think I have about 4 here, Mr. Governor. Jamiu Balogun from Oshodi, he writes in the first, he says, Dear Governor, the issue of education needs proper attention. Please employ more teachers and reintroduce moral education in our schools. That's from Jamiu Balogun. Adeshino Olukoga says, please, sir, government has to enforce the law on the use of pedestrian bridges in Lagos, because crossing these roads brings traffic. And, you know, I think you understand what it means. Our dear Governor, I sincerely appreciate what you are doing in Lagos State on behalf of all of us at Agor Palace Way, Okota. Kindly help us complete the rest of the major access roads. The job has been done halfway. Uche or Haji. And our working governor, thanks for Oshodi road maintenance. Please tell us how we can be part of the Lagos Homes mortgage. And Alabi Williams writes in this final one, Mr. Governor, and it sort of interfaces with what you've talked about earlier. Alabi Williams from Lagos says, on housing, what magic did Jakonde and others perform to provide social housing for people in the lower cadre that this regime is shy of? If government takes advantage of economies of scale, you can build affordable houses without government going broke.
Okay, thank you. You've come in series.
I thought I'd get them out of the way.
But I think we better deal with the last issue first.
Okay.
If the last contributor, whose name you didn't mention,
Alabi Williams.
I would really like to learn from him what he can do. I'm open to suggestions, but the much I know is that our housing is built with brick, made of cement. Made of sand and steel. And the roofing and many of the finish have imported components in them. And if for every dollar to finance that importation component, we have to get 170 naira, you can only sell what you buy. I've spoken about sustainability.
Yeah.
Now, I think the gentleman must also remember that in 1979, the Nigerian naira as a unit of currency was stronger than the dollar.
Yeah.
And therefore, what if you do the actual value of those houses then and impose it today, it is doubtful that you will see any significant difference in the values we are looking at today. No. Because, for example, I can tell you about cars. It used to cost about 1,000 naira to buy the small panel van around that time. The smallest car you will buy now is about 1,800,000.
1.8, yes.
The Rio
And that's the
Picanto.
Yes.
So those are the values as they have ratcheted
Yes.
up.
Yes.
That's one. Two, a lot of people who took those houses took them on a mortgage. Let nobody forget that. It was mortgage financing. And not everybody, even at that time, could buy. That's the reality. We haven't put these pictures in full perspective. I can tell you today, I was 16 at the time, and incidentally, I worked in LSDPC on vacation job in the allocation of these houses, because that was our vacation job. My mother couldn't afford to buy, and she wasn't poor. And then there were not enough for everybody as well. And that was why the LBIC was opened up. Unfortunately, that government did not serve out its full term. So we can only continue to imagine what would have happened. But truth be told, since then, how many people have fully paid their mortgages in order to ensure that more money went back into the system to build more houses? These are the real issues. And you see, the concept that government will give out houses, I don't know where we got it from. What government can do is really to enable people get onto a ladder, use their working life, their income to own a house and pay gradually. That is what happens in every other part of the world that I know. I don't know where this idea that government will dash a house is coming from, or as it were, give it for almost nothing. Let's not forget that the global financial crisis started from failure of mortgages. Mortgages were being provided to people who were vulnerable in like an act of goodwill in order to get them onto a ladder that they couldn't support by their income. And immediately the bubble burst, the whole world was affected by it. But without taking too much time, I think the other question was how to get involved in Lagos Homes, is to go onto the Lagos Homes website.
Okay.
I think if you Google it, you will,
Yes.
That may
get
be one
that.
of the reasons why they feel it's elitist.
No, you see, now, it's interesting you say that. Even before we started, they had said to us, it won't work. They are deceiving us. They have sold it to themselves.
Yes.
And we said, no, we can't go out like this. And we had quite some debate. And I said, look, if Nigerians can use the internet to apply for visa when they want to go abroad, they can use it to apply for a home. In that way, our hands are clean and on the table. We won't interfere with the system. You don't need to see us. Now, if we now get pilloried for doing that again and they say we're elitists, well, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. But those who have benefited from the system are at least saying that it is transparent. They went there, they bidded, and they got the houses. I am happy with that.
Okay.
I would rather deliver a transparent process
That a few people
that people get